my fellow Americans? Are we reaping our harvest of greed? Have we built our house on sinking sand? Why are we being ugly Americans?
Welcome to Weekdays Live. This is CJ Holmes, your host and founder of Homeowners for Justice. And today we've got a lot of interesting news and something really encouraging that came to us from Solari Report. Again, Catherine Austin Fitts, more power to her, and let's all connect. So what I want to start today with, of course, is talking about principal reductions and new FHFA director. And what is this about HARP 3? What are you talking about? And of course, we're going to take a quick review. What I like about, if there's anything good about a foreclosure fiasco, the best part is it's being written about. It's now being exposed. It's in articles. It's in the Huffington Post. And we can start to have an exposure of these horrific problems and work to use that to get justice. And again, we must have criminal prosecutions. I believe that's really, really important. Only when there's criminal charges is everybody in the country going to go, oh, they broke the law. That's what we need. So we're going to talk about that. But also, I really wanted to do a little quickie expose on CYPRUS. CYPRUS has been ruined. And this is what we're facing. We're all facing this everywhere around the world. So if we don't do something about this now to help eliminate the risk, then we're going to suffer. And so I want you to see up close and personal what this looks like and what has actually happened. And then Thrive. It's a movie that Catherine Austin Fitts has sent out in her last Solari link. I'm going to play 2 sections. It's over 2 hours long. I'm not going to play 2 hours. You can do that yourself. But there are a couple of key sections that I really wanted to stream into the live stream, tell you where they start in the comment section so that you can pass this on to people. And then I want to discuss the kinds of actions, because they talk about the actions and the solutions, and it's not too late. So that's obviously, you can probably tell I'm real excited about that, because sometimes we end up feeling it's so bad. How much worse can it get before, we can't do anything? And the fact is, we're not in chains and we're not in camps yet. So we still have time to move. So quick, let's start with the new FHFA director, Obama. He's naming a new one, Mel Watt. And this guy is a representative from North Carolina. He's a 20-year veteran of Congress and has been on the powerful House Financial Services Committee. And so he evidently has been favorable of principal reduction. And I believe that's a good thing. It's really interesting how DeMarco, and never forget, DeMarco was in the agency under Jim Johnson, Fannie Mae, and he took all of his lead from Jim when Jim completely corrupted Fannie Mae, led Congress down the garden path, bribed them, bought him off, who is now, for all of these horrible things he did, the chairman, I think, of Goldman Sachs, up high-level management. And so we know that DeMarco has the banker mindset. Believe me, this is really, really important. And he's been refusing to do any principal reduction. And there have been lots of actions against that. So what's fascinating now is that evidently, look at this next little article. He's picking up Mel Watt as a nominee for FHFA director. He's picking up GOP backing. And the White House wants to do a loan forgiveness scheme. That's principal reduction. And so it looks as if, I wanted you to read right down here in the article, that he's endorsed, Watt has been endorsed by Senator Richard Burr, Republican, North Carolina, and praised by Representative Spencer Backus, Republican, Alabama, a former White House Financial Services Committee chairman, shortly after Obama announced he wanted this gentleman to lead FHFA, which of course is in charge of Fannie and Freddie. So it makes a big difference. You've got FHA, Fannie and Freddie actually financing about 90% of the mortgages now in this country, which is unheard of, and it also puts the taxpayer in a risk. And like we talked about yesterday, which again, mind-boggling, that Freddie Mac can sell securities, claim they're selling the risk off to somebody else, except they're guaranteeing them. So please, I have not gotten any explanation from anybody on how that really works. Obviously, they're just saying things, and if you buy into it, they win. Now, this caught my eye, and I've highlighted it here. This is remarks by the president on his announcements, Mel Watt being the one for FHFA. And this is what caught my eye. I'm reading through the article, and it says, the president is speaking. That's why I've called on Congress to give every responsible homeowner in America the chance to save $3,000 a year by refinancing at today's historically low rates. That's like a tax cut for every family who refinances. And families who would be interested in refinancing should ask their representatives why they wouldn't act on that. Why don't we get moving on that? He's ready to sign the bill. And he knows they're talking to members of Congress on both sides of the aisle who recognize this is something that needs to be gotten done. And I'm going, what? What bill is that? What have I missed? So I did a quickie little search, and thank goodness for Google, and we've got to keep internet availability. If they shut down the internet, if they restrict, manage the internet, that's disastrous. So we need to keep the internet open. Nevertheless, here we go. New HARP 3. So HARP didn't work. HARP 2 didn't work. So now it's HARP 3. And this is talking about the Responsible Homeowner Refinancing Act of 2013. So that is evidently the bill that has been introduced. I want you to just catch real quickly. No job verification, no income verification. And so here's the point. It is what it is. At least I believe they've removed the upside down criteria. So if your loan is underwater, you can still get refinance, and that's nice. And if it's underwater more than 125% loan to value, that means if your loan is like 80% of what the house is, if the house is worth 80% of what the loan is, then if it was worth less than that, you couldn't get a refi. Now they've removed that, so your house could be worth 50% of what the loan is, and you could still get the refinance. Trying to help hard-hit families. And again, I've pointed out, this is no fault of their own. The market slid, and now they're stuck. This is truly trying to help people. Here's another quick article on principal forgiveness being the best way to limit the mortgage redefaults, because what's actually happened is HAMP went out, they trumpeted that it would help 2 to 4 million homeowners. It's only 861,000, I believe, now that have been helped, and like 300,000 are redefaulting. But HAMP didn't really give principal reduction. It gave a principal balloon at the end. Well, that's so discouraging. Give me a break. Your house is, 50% underwater, and you're still going to end up having to pay all of it. Even after you pay 30 years on this piece, then at the end you've got this piece to pay off when you sell. What's the point? So I think it encourages strategic defaults. And actually the CBO, Congressional Budget Office, pointed out that principal reductions actually would make the taxpayer more money. So I think that has undermined DeMarco's position. He's been holding out saying, oh, no, it would hurt the taxpayer. And now we're discovering, no, it wouldn't. It would actually help the taxpayer, help the homeowners. But you got to remember, DeMarco was thinking like an elite banker, which is punish everybody as much as possible so we can gain global control. I believe that is the answer, and you're going to see why I say that when I start showing you these pieces of Thrive. Now, real quickly, I wanted to just point out some of these egregious things that are being shared now in writing in what I would, well, it's online mainstream media, Huffington Post. This is printed today, May 2, and this is business as usual when it comes to foreclosure. And here are a couple of the really egregious stories that they're quoting. So, and this is the writer, I'm reading this. So Treasury puts out a BS plan, gives it a catchy name like Home Affordable Modification Program, HAMP, admits in a congressional hearing, this is what Geithner did, that it was meant to help the banks from the runway, remember that? And can't figure out why it's failing or why homeowners are now defaulting on the lower payments they were not only offered but promised. Maybe, just maybe, it's business as usual. A neighbor of mine, so here we have a couple of stories. A neighbor of mine told me last week her servicer changed from Chase to Ocwen a few months ago. Chase had given her a permanent modification in '09, which she's been paying faithfully. Last year, Ocwen took over the loan. Not only did they refuse to honor the modification Chase had granted, but they raised her monthly payments and are demanding back payments of the lost income resulting from the lowered payments. And here's another story. We had a loan mod in place with Chase. Then they sold it to Ocwen several months later. The amount went up by $400. We are attempting to be remodified, and everything we send them is not legible, or they never get it. They set up appointments, and when you hang up, they say everything is fine, got everything. Then 1 week later, you get a letter saying everything is not fine, and you have a week to get that info, and in some cases, additional info that you just sent them via email, or else you jeopardize the remod. HAMP, this is disgraceful. If they are working in cooperation with you, you need to know that people are being given the runaround. You and I would say, well, duh. And that is the point. This is directly the point, that they are attempting as best they can with every tactic in the book to push you and me and everyone else on the planet into foreclosure. They want to take the houses. They can re-securitize them. I was talking to Linda, I think, about why do they want these? Why do they fight so hard for these houses? And the issue is then they can re-securitize them. They do get free money, but then let's never forget they're fractionalizing these. So every time they get one house, it's like they got 30 houses. And they're sticking them into the mortgage-backed securities just like they did before. Nobody has made them stop. And so they're reinsuring, 30 times the loan. They get all the payments. If they stick each one of these loans into, let's just say 6 different mortgage-backed securities, then they get 6 payment streams. They get 6 payoffs for insurance. They get all the bonus when they do, when they sell these new mortgage-backed securities. It is truly the scheme and scam of the planet, and it is meant to ruin everybody. That is the point. And so let's never forget. And when you write comments on articles like this, because a lot of times they'll have comments, say these things. And let's start linking, Homeowners for Justice site. Let's link the new Thrive link you're going to have here in a minute. This movie from the Solari Reports. Let's start linking all of this information on every one of these comment sections. That should help get it out. It's an idea I have, besides putting it all on our Facebook pages. Except most of the people like me really still struggle with how do we ever find anything in Facebook, and exactly what's the point other than just having a whole bunch of conversation. So if you can help me on that, that'd be great. Okay, I wanted to share this little article with you about the down payment debate flaring up again because I loved the way it was written. They're getting it down right. This is good. It says the down payment debate is back. Oh no. The argument for make down payments higher goes like this. This is the argument. This sounds sort of like the loser borrower. It's all the borrower's fault. It's the same kind of myth, except this is about the loans. So this is the myth for the loans. During the mortgage meltdown, many of the worst loans required only small down payments, and some financing required no down payments. Therefore, the cause of the foreclosure mess was the lack of higher down payments. Now, I love this because he's saying there's a wisp of truth to this view. It's true. Many non-traditional loans required very little down, if anything, and many of those loans resulted in foreclosures. But that wasn't necessarily the reason they went into default. He said these other troubling characteristics in the loans, such as negam, negative amortization, and massively increasing mortgage payments, that was the reason. And so he's pointing out that it turns out that loans with little down actually have attractive foreclosure levels. In other words, foreclosures on well-written loans that don't have negam, that don't have exploding payments, actually are doing very well when it comes to foreclosures. Foreclosures are very low. It's not the down payment. And that is the fallacy of composition. People will say 1 plus X equals 2, and they don't understand that those two items don't connect. So we need to understand what really connects and how it connects so that we can challenge these myths when we see them. It is not the myth of the low down payment that's what caused foreclosures. It's the truth that the other items written into these toxic loans meant to make them fail, such as negative amortization. And the key with negam is that there was a maximum amount that the loan could go negative, and then it would hit the wall and the payment would explode. So for example, $1,500 a month, you borrowed $600,000. The $1,500 didn't even cover interest. And so the loan principal could grow up to 125%. And that's hit the wall. So at that point, which typically took 3-4 years, however much was not being paid, and the principal was accumulating, once it hit the wall, you couldn't make the low payments anymore. Your payment would explode. So they just created these loans designed to fail. They knew they would, and that was intentional, and they've sold them to everybody on the planet so that they could ruin everybody. That is the point. You'll see more about that today. And just another quick update. New housing barons widen their sights and bets. Yes. There's more and more hedge funds, money going after single-family homes. And again, this is speculation. They don't know exactly who or what. They do know that if you took all the hedge funds right now and the thousands of homes they own, compared to the market, it is not that large of a percentage. But in many individual markets, remember we don't have a national housing market, we have a local housing market. So in different locales, they can be devastating. If they own 1,000 homes and it's all in the same county, they can manipulate that county without a doubt. Almost on any county. LA maybe not so much because they have tens of thousands. Their market is huge. But that's the point. What percentage of these investor-owned homes are a percent of that particular market, of the homes there and or of the normal sales? Remember, in my county, it's about 5,000 homes are sold a year. So that's about 400 and some a month. So if some entity came into Sonoma County and owned even 500 homes or 1,000 homes, it would make a big difference, particularly if they decided to list any number of them at one time. So just another quick article for you to take a look at. And now I'd like to take just a few minutes to really focus on CYPRUS, because the bottom line is the big depositors in CYPRUS lose far more than they feared. And this is how it's going to play out. That's why I want to talk about it. So I want to scroll down here to where you can start seeing At Bank of Cyprus, 22.5% of deposits over 100,000 euros will attract no interest. The remaining 40% will continue to attract interest but will not be repaid unless the bank does well. So we're talking now about 62.5% of these deposits. That is a huge number. And you need to read the rest of this article, but this is what it looks like to have your life savings confiscated. So they've cited two examples here. One example, of course, is from a person who worked hard all of his life. He's 65 years old. He had left Cyprus. He'd gone to Australia. He'd built a life from nothing. He worked, morning, noon, and night, saved up money, retired to Cyprus with about $1 million in his life savings, and he planned to spend it on his grandchildren, getting them through university, having a comfortable retirement. You know the name of the game. This is worldwide. This is what the people think and want and plan for. He says, I went to sleep Friday as a rich man. I woke up a poor man. They took the money. They took it. It's all gone. And so now what is he going to do? You can read the rest of the article. Here is a statement which I've actually tried to enlarge. I've put it on this overhead. This is a company, a small IT, internet technology company in Cyprus. You'll notice, if you can see, and you can look at the article too, their balance was 849,000 and change. They have now available to them 128,000. The blocked funds is $720,000. They took $720,000 out of that. Well, they blocked it. They didn't take it. They're turning that into bank stock. And this is what actually they're saying. Over 700,000 of expropriated money, confiscated money, will be used to repay the country's debt. Probably this company will get back maybe 20% of that amount in 6 or 7 years. This company, this guy says, I'm not a Russian oligarch. Remember, the oligarchs got out. They were allowed to escape with all their funds. But just a European medium-sized IT business. Thousands of other companies around Cyprus have the same situation, so listen to what he's doing and then multiply that by thousands for Cyprus. Their business is definitely ruined. All the Cypriot workers will be fired. So everybody loses their job. The company, is moving to a small Caribbean country where authorities have more respect to people's assets. And of course, my comment to that is, watch out. I think they're going to take it all, everywhere. Also, they are thinking about using Bitcoin to pay wages and for payments between our partners. So these companies now are seriously considering alternative ways of mediums of exchange. And that is going to happen in a massive mushroom cloud for every country they do this to. And the banks are going to do this. I think they're going to do it probably worldwide, and they do it all at once. That would make best sense to me if I wanted to dominate the globe. So just all you have to do to try to second guess what these guys are going to do to us, and it's not very many, just think about it. Just put yourself in the mindset, okay, I have at my disposal techniques that I could control the planet. What would I do? That is the issue. So what I would like to do is to play a few minutes of this particular, it's the Thrive movie, and it's from the Thrive Movement. And the thrivemovement.com has a bunch of things that we can do, organizations we can connect with. I've only just had a couple of hours to really review this, so you're going to help in connecting. I think we need to get all of our organizations, anything and everything that you are connected with that is a new paradigm needs to be connected with the movement. I wanted to play this section because these few minutes really sets well, in my opinion, the situation as it is. The first 50 minutes of this that I'm skipping right now talks about the ability that we have for free energy and why they say things like this. And in the website, they have a list of all of the people that they've interacted with, the proof of what they're saying, because some of this sounds pretty far out. As you, like me, are starting to really question everything we've been told. Now everything, every mental picture is up for rethinking and redefinition. This, I believe, will help us all.
As difficult as it was for me, I have come to an inescapable and profoundly disturbing conclusion. I believe that an elite group of people and the corporations they run have gained control over not just our energy, food supply, education, and healthcare, but over virtually every aspect of our lives. And they do it by controlling the world of finance, not by creating more value, but by actually controlling the source of money. When I followed the money, I found that it took me up the levels of a pyramid. Here we are at the bottom level going about our daily lives. Above us is government, people who are given a monopoly on force and use it to tax and control us whether or not we agree. But who controls them? At the next level are the corporations. Many would say that it is now corporations and not nation states that rule the world. They call it a corporatocracy. To acquire the world's resources and control the markets, this corporatocracy must have access to cheap money. The big corporations get their loans at special rates from the big banks, which means that those who control the major banks, the moneyed elite, ultimately control the corporations. As I've followed the money, I've learned that almost everything I once believed about money is simply not true.
It's interesting how few questions we actually ask about very everyday things, like when we go into a bank and we ask for a loan of, say, $50,000, £50,000, what actually happens? You see, most people live their lives based on a kind of vague image of what happens. What actually happens is you ask for £50,000, they type into your account £50,000. That's all they do. They don't mint any coins, they don't print any money, they don't move any precious metal anywhere. They just put £50,000 into your account on a computer screen. From that moment, you start paying interest on money that has never, does not, and will never exist.
It turns out that banks actually have about 9 times as much money loaned out as they have on reserve in their vaults. This is possible because of what's referred to as fractional reserve lending. The way it works is that the Federal Reserve, or the central bank in any country, is legally allowed to determine the amount a bank must have on reserve. In the US, it's currently around 10%. So if you deposit $10,000 into the bank sets aside 10%, or $1,000, and then loans out the rest of your money. The way it works is, say another person comes into the bank and asks for a car loan of $9,000. At this moment, the bank loans out the $9,000 from your original deposit. It isn't there anymore. The borrower then pays the person selling the car, and they go deposit the money into another bank, which is part of the same central banking system. This $9,000 is treated as a new deposit, and the process continues. The money gets redeposited and reloaned until the initial deposit of $10,000 becomes $100,000. The banking system just created $90,000 by loaning out your money. Apparently it began with the goldsmiths in the 17th century when people were trading in gold. Gold was heavy to carry around, so people stored the actual metal in vaults and traded receipts instead. Those receipts were the first paper money. Since only a few people would withdraw their gold at any given time, the vault owners, basically the new bankers, began creating receipts for more metals than they actually held. They loaned out those receipts and charged interest on money, gold, that they didn't really have. That's how our so-called fractional reserve system was born. In this system, the bankers get to make up money out of nothing, while the rest of us have to work hard to earn it. It has created a modern form of serfdom where the mass of society is now working to pay off their debt to the banks. Under this fractional reserve scheme, we inevitably become debt slaves to a ruling class of financial elite, not because they are better or smarter than anyone else, but because they have rigged the system to benefit themselves at the expense of most people on the planet. Catherine Austin Fitts is an expert on this issue. She was an Assistant Secretary of Housing and Urban Development under President George Bush Sr., and then an advisor to the Clinton administration.
Let's set up a game of Monopoly and you want to buy Park Place. What I can continually do is just print money, give myself more money, lower the value of your money by printing more. No matter how hardworking you are or how successful you are, I can always end up buying you for free.
So how come if you or I make up money, it's called counterfeiting, but if the banks do it, it's increasing the money supply? How did the banks get this power? This is Jekyll Island, where in 1910, representatives from the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, Morgans, and other private bankers gathered secretly to draft the legislation that would create the Federal Reserve. Ed Griffin literally wrote the book on what happened at Jekyll Island.
Central banks are banking cartels which have gone into partnership with the respective governments in the countries where they operate. And they've been given monopolistic power over the creation of the nation's money supply. That's what the politicians handed to them as a gift, you might say, for the partnership. Now, in return, what did the bankers do for the politicians? They promised to create money out of nothing, now that they've got this legal power to do it anytime the government needs it.
And since 2008, we've witnessed the greatest fake money printing run in recorded history. This financial sleight of hand disguises the costs, hides who's to blame, and leaves us as debt slaves working to pay off the bill. I found it revealing that in the same year the Federal Reserve was founded, 1913, the Internal Revenue Service was also established. And income tax was then instigated so you and I would have to pay the politicians' debt, plus interest, to the bankers.
The problem is we have a privately owned central bank system in the United States disguised as a government-owned system. Now, if you look in the telephone book here in the Washington, D.C. area, you look up for Federal Reserve in the blue government pages, it's not there. It's in the white pages right next to Federal Express. It's a privately owned central bank.
What is the proper relationship, what should be the proper relationship between a chairman of the Fed and a president of the United States?
Well, first of all, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and that means basically that there is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take. There is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take.
We have a private bank that prints money on behalf of the Treasury. The Federal Reserve prints money on a debt-based system which creates scarcity. But it puts a group of insiders in a position of having access to all the data about the economy when we don't. So you have a small group of bankers who understand the data on how the money works in the economy, and it gives them the ability to print money in a way that the insiders are protected and everybody else is drained.
Catherine went on to compare a healthy economy to a vibrant torus, balanced, freely flowing, and energized throughout. in contrast to what's happening in our current economy.
What you have is a system that's very dynamic, and it's trying to optimize. But intertwined in the core of it, you have a tapeworm. The way a tapeworm works in your body is it injects a chemical into your body that makes you crave what's good for the tapeworm and bad for you. You have a parasite that's very much manipulating and engorging itself at the expense of the whole.
We live in a tapeworm economy where the financial elite are the tapeworm and they're feeding on us. And they don't like it when people blow their cover. After Catherine began exposing government corruption at the highest levels, the FBI raided her company and seized its assets. She was dragged through the courts for 10 years before being found innocent. So we've got the Federal Reserve, a privately owned corporation with a monopoly on creating money, but with no accountability, backed up by a government with a monopoly on force. The country got sold on the Fed as an institution that would help stabilize the economy and remain independent of politics. But in fact, in close to a century of existence, the Federal Reserve has done just the opposite. Since they took charge, we've been robbed through inflation, and the purchasing power of the dollar has declined more than 96%. And the wealth gap makes it clear most of the money is going to a very few. Only 16 years after the Federal Reserve was in power, America experienced the Great Depression. My research revealed that before the big crash in 1929, the elite bankers pulled their money out of the stock market. After the crash, they used that money to buy up cheap stocks and smaller failing banks for pennies on the dollar. Among the bankers who consolidated their wealth this way were the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, and Morgans. A similar scenario played out in the 2008 financial collapse, with the same bankers benefiting. In the years leading up to the collapse, the biggest banks, including Bank of America, Citigroup, and Chase, controlled by the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, and Morgans, were bundling and trading bad loans that they knew would eventually fail. It's like putting rotten oranges in a box and selling them as grade AAA. The bundlers of the debt knew it was only a matter of time before someone would open that box and see that the content was worthless, since they were the ones who packed the boxes in the first place. When the rotten oranges, what we hear about as unsound loans, derivatives, and credit default swaps, were finally discovered, everyone was impacted. People lost their homes, their jobs, their businesses, and their retirements. Meanwhile, the biggest banks who created the problem in the first place were the ones who got bailed out. Why is that? Why would the Federal Reserve give trillions to the banks, even though the majority of Americans were against bailing them out? And why not help those most in need rather than the perpetrators of the financial collapse? My research led me to believe that the same people who created the Federal Reserve, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, and the Morgans, still control it, and they use this scheme to bail themselves out at our expense.
Many of the banks created are still the most powerful lobby on Capitol Hill, and they, frankly, own the place.
I'm convinced that the near collapse of the economy in 2008 resulted from an orchestrated pump and dump scheme designed and executed by the big bankers to consolidate wealth and power. David Icke explains how he sees the Federal Reserve rigging the so-called business cycles.
Stage one, it's like throwing a fishing line out. Stage one, you put lots of money, units of exchange, into circulation. You do this by pushing interest rates down, by making lots of loans. This is the part of the cycle we call a boom. Because there's lots of units of exchange in circulation, there's lots of money changing hands. That generates lots of economic activity. That generates jobs. And as more and more money is spent, there's more demand, so companies take out more loans of fresh air money to increase their production. People get confident in their everyday lives. Hey, you know, I work for this company, they've got lots of orders, it's really going great, my job's safe, I tell you what, we're gonna have a bigger house. Then they start to change it. What they do is they pull the fishing line in. They push interest rates up. Now, fewer people, are taking out loans, and they make the criteria for having a loan from the bank stronger anyway. And also, now, as interest rates have gone up, a larger part of people's income is going to pay back the extra interest and not being circulated in buying things. Suddenly, there's nothing like as much money in circulation, and therefore, fewer things are being bought. Companies start to go down in terms of their profits. They start to shed jobs, and they start to go out of business. People lose their jobs, they can't pay the mortgage anymore of the big house they took out in the good times. Now what the banks are doing is starting to reel the fishing line in, because as they go bankrupt, companies and individuals, the banks get the real wealth, the property, the land, the resources that they had signed to them for lending merely figures on a screen. Now this economic cycle of fishing line out, fishing line back, lots of units in circulation, pull them in, has been going on for centuries. And what it's done, it's stolen and accumulated the real wealth of the world in the hands of the few.
At the international level, central bankers use the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund to make more money while exploiting the resources of countries they lend to, bankrupting them in the process. The central bank of central banks is the Rothschild-created Bank for International Settlements. The elite are positioning themselves to control access to virtually everything we need to survive.
No matter where you go in the world, the money is controlled by the banking system. They decide if people eat or if they don't eat. Who's a billionaire and who lives on less than $1 a day? He who controls the money controls the world, and a very few control the money.
At this point, my view of the world had been turned upside down. I was struggling with the realization that the failure and suffering of so many is actually success and fulfillment for a few. The elite central bankers who fooled the world into letting them create money. They already have vast fortunes, so what is their end game? What is their ultimate agenda? I kept running across compelling evidence and credible experts saying that the secret agenda of the banking elite is nothing less than total global domination. At first, I resisted the idea, but I was committed to finding out what was keeping us from thriving, no matter where it might lead. One night I woke up at 3 a.m. with the burning question: if this small group wanted to dominate the entire world, what would they need to control to accomplish it? I jumped out of bed and started making a list. First and foremost, they'd have to control money, and they do. Controlling money allows them to run everything else. They'd need to control energy, and they do. They already control big agriculture and world trade. They're buying up water supplies worldwide. They've got health in their pocket, and they're trying to suppress natural alternatives. Mainly, they'd have to control what information we'd get and how we'd react to it. In America, the internet, our greatest tool for communication and grassroots organizing, is currently not controlled or censored, but its open status is being attacked from all sides. Governments, corporations, and the United Nations are all attempting to take control. For complete domination, dissent has to be controlled. They'd need to take away our rights, spy on ordinary citizens, and track every aspect of our lives. As the day dawned, I knew that a powerful elite had almost everything set up to rule the world. And I had the frightening realization that Big Brother is not just coming, he's here now. We are already in the matrix, so how do we get out? To envision that, I realized I needed to discover what their ruling structure looks like and how it works. A relatively small group of families, especially the Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Morgans, and Carnegies, along with the Harrimans, the Schiffs, and the Warburgs, have been leading the controlling elite in the West for generations. I'm not implying that every individual in these families is aware of or active in the global domination agenda. However, I'm convinced the heads of these dynasties control the corporate and banking interests that carry out the sinister scheme that is destroying so many lives.
I'm going to stop it right there for now. You're welcome to follow the rest of it. I want to jump ahead, and I've left out some of the other pretty dramatic and horrific parts of this. Please watch it on your time. I want to jump to the solutions, and I also wanted right here to point out that we do have a solution to the artificial scarcity. You know, this is the point. He talked about they throw the money out there and then they reel it in. They shut down where we can get loans. If we stop playing that game with them, and we can do that as a nation, as an individual, as a county, as a state, as a country, we can shift over into public banking. And so I just wanted to bring that in right now before we watch the rest of his solutions, because there's other things, connections and actions and things that we need to do. And I like it. They've got a list. I like lists. But this is the point. The existing private banking system imposes artificial scarcity on the public. Private banks do this by withholding loans to small business. Remember, we just said a few weeks ago, we had the comment, the article, if a small business wants a loan, they're supposed to use a credit card. They can't get a loan from a bank. And that's pretty well true across the board right now. You, as a small business, you want to start one or expand your business, you go into the bank and see what they tell you. And so private banks withhold loans to small business and move the money out of the communities that do business with the banks and are beholden to shareholders rather than local customers. This is a monopoly. And whenever you have a monopoly, it creates artificial scarcity, because the less you have, the more the monopoly makes. They can jack the prices. That's why we don't like monopolies. In the case of money, that scarcity results in inequality that hinders common folks purchasing an investment power. That's you and me. We can't get loans. Only the favored few can get loans and manipulate the money. Simply put, money is limited by bankers as if it were a precious metal, when it's really more like a simple metric, like inches, something we can't run out of. And if we shift the paradigm from allowing these private banksters to create money out of nothing and then enslave us with the interest payments, let's go to public banking, where at least if we're having interest payments like 1 or 2%, that benefits the community. That's a benefit. And it would never explode. The loans would never explode. They wouldn't be securitized, on and on and on. And this is the point. Right now, we're left with a nation where there's plenty of work, but no jobs. There's plenty of demand for services, but no investment is targeted where it will do the most good. When you combine this artificial scarcity with a federal government that's aligned with the banks and ideologically committed to austerity, the result is the slow death of the local community's vitality. And we see that in community after community after community. So I just wanted to point out, this is a really good article. This is about public banking as an answer to artificial scarcity. And I also wanted to remind you about the Public Banking Conference. It's going to be held in San Rafael, June 2 to 4, 2013. That's coming up just a month away. Actually, a month from today, May 2. And we're going to have Matt Taibbi and Ellen Brown and Birgitta John's daughter from Iceland, speakers at this conference. So if you can make even a discussion, just if you can't attend the whole conference, because a lot of people can't, they're working. But if whatever you can attend or whatever you can join with us, please do so. And I plan to be live streaming between the workshops, so at least you could watch that. And during that live stream, we'll be interviewing each of the workshop presenters. So I hope to bring that to the public on a free basis. Now I'd like to jump back into Thrive. We're starting near the end. They're talking about the solutions, and this is what we need to really focus on, because you know, what we're facing is pretty grim. It's pretty grim. They talk about the plan is to kill off, you know, most of the people on the planet. Anyway, you can watch that yourself. I want to focus on the solutions and what we can actually do and how we can connect. So after this, I'm going to go to their website and show you a couple of things that I've found.
We are at a critical fork in the road in human evolution. One road is leading toward tyranny and possible self-destruction. The other would lead us to a peaceful, healthy civilization based on honoring the rights and freedom of every single person on the planet. To set off in this new direction, it's up to you and me to clear that road. The time has come to say, enough. There is another way. I believe that together we have the knowledge, the resources, and the solutions to meet that challenge. I see this process as nothing less than a struggle for the soul of humanity. It begins with a shift in worldview, answering the question, who are we really? What is human nature? Are we humans what the elite would have us believe? Stupid, greedy creatures who, if left to our own devices, would devolve into violence and chaos, and so for our own good must be ruled over by a self-appointed elite? Or are we naturally caring and creative? I believe when people are healthy and have what we need to survive, we can create a world based on integrity, freedom, and compassion. A world where everyone can thrive. Which of these two views will shape our future? That's our choice now. The agenda of the ruling elite is the product of a destructive worldview, based on their beliefs that there's not enough to go around, that some people are more deserving than others, and that their own safety depends on maintaining absolute control over the rest of us. In short, their worldview is based on scarcity and fear. But as powerful as they are, the architects of the New World Order cannot create their dreadful vision without our collusion. To stop them, to render their agenda obsolete, we have to wake up. We have to take action.
This is like the last effort of a particular phase of civilization. It's its last gasp, really, and I often use the metaphor of the caterpillar becoming the butterfly, because the caterpillar crunches its way through the ecosystem. It's very destructive. It eats 300 times its weight in a day until it's so bloated that it hangs itself up and goes to sleep, and its skin turns into a hardened chrysalis. And then in its body you get these imaginal cells, biologists actually call them that, forming within the caterpillar's body. The caterpillar's body then actually becomes a nutritive soup for those cells. But what's important about that metaphor is that the old and the new coexist for a while. And it's the job of the caterpillar to preserve its life. It's a desperate government that we have now, trying to control oil in the Middle East and wanting now to promote nuclear energy and all these things that they know better, but they have to play out the role of protecting themselves. It's their job. And if you love butterflies, you don't go around stepping on caterpillars. So we can't hate them, it doesn't do any good. But if you want alternative energy, you don't ask an oil economy administration to produce it for you. We have to produce it. We imaginal cells have to show that it's cheaper, more efficient, and more effective. Our job is to build a new world.
If we had the vision and a worldview that says our crisis is a birth and everybody's needed and everybody will have more of what they truly want, you could turn this desperate world into a renaissance of human creativity and love.
It may seem that the controlling elite has all the cards, but we have many advantages of our own. First, let's talk numbers. Very few people are consciously perpetrating the domination agenda. Most of those helping to implement the plan don't understand the full picture of what they're a part of. By my calculations, we outnumber the actual architects of the plan by more than 1,000,000 to 1 in the US alone. Entrepreneur and environmentalist Paul Hawken estimates that there are now well over 1 million organizations in the world that work towards social and environmental justice, comprising the largest social movement in the history of humankind. This movement, when connected electronically, could become a network of networks that will be the most powerful activist force for change ever.
If you look at the people who are involved with restoring this earth and stopping the damage and resisting the depredation and nurturing change and reimagining what it means to be a human being, and you're not optimistic, then you might want to get your heart checked, because there is an extraordinary, beautiful, gorgeous, fierce group of people in this world who are taking this on.
The second important advantage for us is that all the power centers that the elite control require our participation. If enough of us withdraw our support, their plan can't work. This is true of the central banks, the military, the corporate media, the government, and more. And following the models of Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr., we have the power of nonviolent non-participation. It takes tremendous energy, resources, and deception to try to dominate the lives of others. In moving toward freedom, on the other hand, we have on our side the evolutionary life force and what Gandhi called satyagraha, the simple power of truth.
In India, we have thousands of villages which are now freedom zones. So we will not accept patenting. We will not cooperate with it, just like Gandhi did not cooperate with salt laws. We will not allow chemicals and genetically engineered crops to enter our ecosystems because they threaten this biodiversity. And this freedom movement, which is a freedom movement for all species, not just for individual humans, is something that's growing so fast and is reflected in the movement for GMO-free zones in Europe. I turn my back and there's another 1,000 GMO-free zones. 90% of Italy, 90% of Austria. The freedom zones around the seed, around food, are creating massive shifts.
In Bolivia, a grassroots movement took to the streets, relentlessly banging pots and pans, and eventually stopped the foreign corporate takeover of their water resources. Though very little is shown by the corporate media, there are countless success stories going on every day all over the world. I wasn't willing to make this film until I knew there were responses that are a match for the crisis. And now the power of the internet enables us to share the breadth and the depth of this research.
We've spent years creating a vast website, thrivemovement.com, that brings it all together and makes the information and what we can do about it accessible to everyone. Here you have your very own Navigator module to go deeper into the main subjects covered in the film: code, problem, and solutions. You can study strategies and tactics and connect with others to take high-leverage actions.
Every fact stated in this film has been independently verified, and the reference is on our website. This sector navigator facilitates whole systems thinking that recognizes that actions in one area impact all the others. The center of the sector navigator is worldview, because it determines how we experience everything that happens within and around us. In every sector, you'll find critical issues, resources, group strategies, and individual actions to peacefully and productively affect real change. Our resource tree will link you to the people, organizations, and media that we most recommend to help you get more fully educated and engaged. I was encouraged to find that there are a minimum number of actions which, working together, can tip the scales. It's not endless. Once we see the big picture, we'll look at what each of us can do to help accomplish it. Let's take a look at the strategic antidotes to their economic domination. We need to stop any more bailouts of banks or corporations, dismantle the Federal Reserve, withdraw taxpayer support from central banking agencies such as the IMF and World Bank, allow development of alternative currencies and independent banks, and refuse international taxes. My main emphasis is on solutions in the US, because that's what I know best. But just as the predicament is global, so are the principles on which the solution strategies are based.
Here are some tactical actions that we can take as individuals that don't take much time or money to make a real difference right now. Get informed, speak up, and connect with others. Bank locally. When we move our money out of the big centralized banks and into locally owned banks and credit unions, we defund the problem and fund the solution all in one move. Buy and invest responsibly. Every dollar you spend sends a message. Join the movement to audit and end the Federal Reserve. It's robbing us. Join a coalition to keep the internet fair and open. Don't let anybody take control over it. Support independent media. Get your information from diverse sources and think about who's funding the news you get. Support organic, non-GMO farming. Join movements to bring about honest elections, including traceable paper ballots and campaign finance reform. Congress can only be accountable to us when corporations stop funding them. Advocate for renewable and new energy technology. Bring the conversation about free energy out into the open. It will transform the power dynamic on this planet faster than anything in recorded history. Sign up for critical mass actions. It's a strategy to leverage our power by waiting until a huge number of us agree to participate before taking an action. Imagine 1 million of us acting in unison. Then again, imagine even more.
I've been inspired by how many grounded solutions and real-life problem solvers there actually are. Akila Sherrills is one person whose work especially touched me. He helped broker a gang truce between the Crips and Bloods.
One of the things that we discovered in the process of waging peace in the neighborhood was that conflict is healthy. You know, it's unresolved conflict that actually leads to violence. When we first launched the peace treaty, we had a lot of success in our first year. Gang homicides dropped 44% in the neighborhood based upon our actions.
Akila describes what happened when two rival gang leaders finally met after the truce.
The brother came up to him and told him, man, look, I know you got some hard feelings for me. You know, maybe I got some hard feelings for you. He said, but because of this truce, man, he said, I'm willing to put all of that to the side. And he stuck out his hand. He hugged him and he said he closed his eyes because he was preparing for a sharp, a knife to enter his back. He was waiting for for a bullet, to be shot into his stomach. But he said after a few moments, he held that embrace. He realized that, that it was genuine.
I believe that having a clear picture of our potential is as important as uncovering what stands in its way. So I want to take you to a possible world of the future. It's a world the elite would have you believe is an impossible pipe dream, but I'm convinced it's a world that is utterly within our grasp. We can create a world where people can thrive, where we can feel safe and secure. The air, water, and food are clean. A world where communities are capable of producing their own energy and food, and trade is open and fair. Rather than focusing on punishment, instead justice restores lives and losses. Insurance pays doctors to keep people healthy. Education is voluntary, serving the needs of individuals instead of corporations. We get honest feedback from independent media. There are no subsidies and no bailouts. Imagine that with an honest money system, little or no taxes, and low electric and fuel bills, you would have the money to pay off your home and car and be free to save and invest. You would enjoy more wealth, freedom, and security, all while working the same or probably less.
Let's say I started a mutual fund for my neighborhood, and all the neighbors had stock, okay? And so they healed the environment and their stock went up in value. So instead of getting drained financially, they're making money. They're making money from things that make their kids safer and prevent the planet from dying. So you kind of have your cake and eat it too. Instead of working all week to make money and then coming home and trying to save the planet on the weekends, you can spend Monday through Friday making money saving the planet and then, go to the beach.
This vision of a thriving world is based on what could be called the liberty perspective. There is a simple principle that underlies this approach: non-violation. Nobody gets to violate you or your property, and you don't get to violate anyone else, except in genuine self-defense. This is the one rule I've found that every single person agrees with, at least for themselves. I believe that non-violation is the true north of humanity's moral compass and our core navigating insight. This insight can guide us and protect each and every individual as we set up voluntary, self-sustaining systems. It is a way of living that I can stand for wholeheartedly and without reservation. I've been profoundly influenced by the work of Austrian economist Ludwig von Mises, who developed a whole philosophy and economic system based on the core ethic of non-aggression. Motivated by having witnessed the ravages of communism and fascism in Europe, he committed his life to finding a just way. He recognized that those systems, as well as socialism and even democracy, wrongly assume the rights of the collective, or the group, to be more important than those of the individual. I had always gone along with the view that more people will thrive if we consider the group's needs above the individual's. But when I took a closer look, I found it doesn't really work that way. In the name of what's best for the group, governments have been responsible for most of the war, death, and destruction on the planet. More than 200 million individuals were killed in the 20th century alone. So how would applying the principle of non-violation change this dynamic? It would take us from incremental change of a fundamentally flawed system to a complete transformation where not just some, or even the majority, but everyone could truly have the opportunity to thrive. In order to implement the principle of non-violation, it makes sense to me to honestly re-examine our past, because it doesn't work to try to build a healthy living system on top of an unhealthy one.
We have to go back to the most fundamental acts of injustice upon which the country was founded, and the seizure of the lands of the people, and the slaughter of their women and children, and the rendering destitute most of the remnants of these people, is such a grievous wrong that we believe that we have to deal with that, to come to grips with that in a fundamental way. Understanding that they're not wrongs that were done and completed 150 years ago. They're wrongs that are continued every single day.
So you have, through the history of North America and the United States, over 500 treaties signed with indigenous nations where every single one of them now has been violated. You have, in fact, a tremendous amount of wealth having been generated from indigenous people's lands and resources, and billions of dollars every year still being generated by corporations and European nations based on the continued exploitation of indigenous people's lands and resources. If we didn't have large corporations, if we didn't have Western governments defining how you and I were to relate to each other, living here in North America now together, how would we relate to one another? How would we make it different?
It's going to take time and courageous effort to shift the consciousness and accomplish the tasks that will move us toward the world I'm talking about. And yet I know of no greater gift that we could give to future generations. We can't do everything at once. I envision 3 overlapping stages of the solutions process. In stage 1, we bring as much integrity as possible to our current systems. If we cut the U.S. military budget in half, it would still roughly equal the defense spending of the entire rest of the world. Between that and getting rid of the Federal Reserve, over $1 trillion a year would be freed, enough to feed everyone on our planet, deal with social issues, and heal our environment. Many people believe that widespread starvation and poverty are inevitable, but compared to war, eliminating poverty and restoring the environment are cheap. According to Lester Brown's Earth Policy Institute, it would take under $200 billion a year to restore the Earth's environment and meet global social goals. But this stage isn't the end goal of the liberty perspective. While stage 1 has a lot of the compassion typically associated with a liberal Democrat agenda, stage 2 reflects much of the wisdom of the traditional conservative worldview. In stage 2, we shrink government's role to protecting individual liberty and stewarding things we share in common, like ecosystems and the airwaves we use to communicate. As the system gains integrity and we move to sound currency, people will have enough money to have more control over everything that affects them. Stage 3 grows out of the increasing freedom that people gain in stages 1 and 2, as they have more money and more time. There is no involuntary tax and therefore no involuntary governance. There's no monopoly on force. There are rules, but no rulers. Rigorously protecting individual rights turns out to be key for honoring our interdependence. We can be distinct and unified at the same time. As utopian as this can sound at first, I've been thrilled to see how much practical thinking has been done to deal with tough issues like healthcare, crime, and education. These 3 stages validate the best of both the liberal and conservative perspectives that have divided us for so long, and then reconcile them at a new level, around non-violation, a core ethic we all share. Stage 3 honors human incentive and finally includes the rights of not just many, not just most, but everyone. The torus provides a template for a society based on integrity and wholeness. It conserves what's working. It has built-in feedback so it can self-correct and innovate to maintain balance. We can apply these and other features of the torus dynamic to our human social systems. I truly believe that aligning consciously with the fundamental life energy pattern at every level, physical, emotional, mental, interpersonal, and environmental, is ultimately the art, the science, and the celebration of love. And that's what we're here to learn. The fundamental insight of our interconnectedness changed the way I approach everything. In my own life, I found a practical expression of this philosophy in the modern, nonviolent martial art of Aikido. It offers powerful guidance on how to respond effectively and non-aggressively to the global domination agenda. Morihei Ueshiba, its founder, taught that to practice Aikido, one must mimic the movements of atoms and galaxies. Just as free energy technology blends with the toroidal pattern to access unlimited power, Aikido, the way of harmony, blends with the energy of an attacker, redirecting it to peaceful resolution. Gandhi and King applied these principles of non-aggressive power at the economic and social levels. If we respond with violence to the domination agenda, other than in self-defense, it would only continue the old us versus them paradigm and provide an excuse for even more police-state measures. I believe that it's essential, both morally and strategically, that we take the path of non-aggression. There is another aspect of the torus that has profound implications for how we can respond to the challenges before us. It is the absolute stillness, the 0 point, that lies at the center of each toroidal system. I believe that you and I, as well as every other being, are torus energy fields, centered by stillness and each connected to one another and to the boundless consciousness of a living universe. As much as I benefit from the experience of others, as highlighted here with the Navigating Insights, and as valuable as daily feedback is about what's really going on in the world, as we see with the vitals, I've come to recognize that our primary compass is our own inner guidance. As we learn to quiet the noise and amplify the inner signal, we can better hear the voice that naturally knows and offers wise direction.
We have an entire inner life, a vibrant and lively inner life that is truly the navigator of the path that we take on the outside. If your inner life is the driver of how you show up in the world, it makes sense that if you want to have anything to do with where you're going, that you have to be in relationship to that inner life. You have to be in relationship to the driver. As we develop increased relationship to who's in the driver's seat, what happens is that there is a synergy. It's a symbiotic relationship that our inner lives are actually able to be more in tandem with where we're choosing to go, and we're able to get there. We're not nearly as insignificant in our impact as we think we are.
In order to heal the world, we have to start telling a different story to ourselves. We have to start engaging in a different story with others. It's a collective story that manifests as the world.
Humanity is now in a very interesting evolutionary phase in which we move from hostile, aggressive competition, which is the nature of young species, into a more mature mode of cooperation, collaboration.
There's no question in this country that money, that capital is being increasingly concentrated in the hands of a few. And those who are so powerful are concentrating it further. But there is a force that's more powerful, and that's the power of the people.
When we look at the crises now, it is so easy to fall out of love with life. It is so easy to get pessimistic and desperate. But from my perspective, the crisis has matured to the point of being on the threshold of mass awakening, and that feeling inside me gives me the vitality to know that no matter how small what I'm doing looks to me in the face of these huge problems, that the impulse of evolution is not small. And when it's in everybody who's waking up, it's huge.
And as more and more of us are waking up, linking up, and daring to speak up, the scheme for global domination is being exposed. And we're discovering solutions that can create the world we yearn for and deserve. Again and again throughout history, when people have recognized tyranny rearing its cruel head, they've come together and stood up for liberty. I am confident humankind will look back on this period and be proud that when we saw, we acted. Thank you for coming on this journey with us. I'm convinced we have what it takes to thrive. Let's make it happen.
Let's. So here is their website. These are the top 10 actions. We just saw a brief overview of those. This would be a nice checklist. There's something else I noticed I really want to push, and that is if you go to the movie, it says host a screening. Let's host a screening. They only have 4 or 5 right now on the list. Consider that. Let's get our Occupy groups in every county, every state in this country to host a screening of this so that everybody can see this and start thinking about it. They're not going to agree with everything, and that's not the point. The point is to get them thinking about some other options, some ways something will click with virtually everybody that watches the movie. They may say, oh, I don't believe that part, but they go, oh, I like that part. And that's what we need to do, in my opinion. There's also here another spot, a solutions hub that they talked about. And look at these groups. Look at these groups. So let's find a group. Let's register a group. I haven't even explored how to register a group. So help me out, guys. This is how we're going to bugger the bankers. You mark my words. And I love the thrust of nonviolence, because that only begets more violence. It only gives them an excuse to stomp on us. And you know they have way more power and machine guns and trucks and stuff. That is not the point. The point is we need to peacefully bring in the new paradigm and stop doing what they expect us to do. So move your money, get it out of the banks. And I don't care if it's just a checking account. Move everything out of the mega banks. Tim Non mentioned to me in passing that he had been talking to some of the major banks and they've lost a lot of money by people moving their money out. So keep it up. Let's do this. Let's get all of our neighbors. Did you hear Catherine Austin talk about having a neighborhood association that they had put together like for an investment? What a concept. These are fabulous concepts. As you can tell, I'm super excited. Right now they said 738. Come on, guys. Let's make that 1,000. Let's bring in another 250 groups. Any and every group that you know of that's fighting foreclosures, that's working to amend, move to amend, to change the Constitution, and the Federal Reserve. Let's start connecting with these groups in our areas. Thank you so much for watching. This is a good movie to watch again. I highly recommend that you do that on your own time. Those are the pieces that I just really found powerful and wanted to share with you. And that's it for today. So let's bugger the bankers.
They taught me to fight for my civil rights, but it's always the same. system is bent and the money's all spent.
We're badgered from every direction.
The workers get taxed while the wealthy relax.
With merrier moments reflection.
Where there's brass, there's muck,
and they don't give an ass, 'cause they're programmed against insurrection. And I say, bugger the bankers and politicians, bugger the bureaucrats too, bugger the buggers who make up the rules, and if you're one of them, bugger you, and if you're one of them, bugger you. Now all you good people with passion to vent, don't give up the struggle for justice. But I've done my time on the protesters' line, and these days I show my dissent.